Hello there and welcome back to Valdis Story. Today we're going to be starting a new game, once again on Godslayer difficulty, but this time controlling Vladyn, a ranged playtype, a man cursed with an arm possessed by 100 demons, and an agility/luck focused character. We'll be playing him as a bit of a mage, so we'll be focusing more on luck or intelligence, but we'll see more of that later, when we get into the actual gameplay. For now, much like Reyna's campaign, we start with a bit of a cutscene, and some potentially questionable character art. That one male guardsman's face is a bit suspect. But yes, as we went over in Reyna's campaign, when Vladyn crashed in, it was in the midst of a brawl between some ferals and some guardsmen. They think he's a demon because, well, he kind of is. But he ends up saving them. Now, there's actually a bit of a divergence in the story here when you play as him than when you play as any of the other characters. In any of the other characters' campaigns, he ends up taking damage from fending off the ferals, and you need to cure him as whatever character you're playing as. In his own campaign, he's badass enough that he avoids taking damage entirely. Instead, the god lady Sybil takes damage, and so he goes off to the gardens to pick up the Lourdes tear to cure her. And that's what makes his campaign a fair bit interesting in comparison to the others. Everyone else starts off at the same place as Reyna did above the Tagrim town and the Tagrim derelicts. But Vladyn starts here in Hrok, and the first area he explores are the Hrok Skyways, or Western Skyway, Eastern Skyway, whatever the hell it is, I don't remember. And more importantly, the Abandoned Gardens, the first Poison Hell area that you explore. More to the point, as we'll be finding out, these areas haven't been rebalanced to take into account the fact that you start them as a level 1 character, as opposed to a level 5+ character. Fortunately for Vladyn, that's not too big of an issue because even though he starts off at level 1, that doesn't mean that he has trouble with the combat. Though he is quite fragile, perhaps the most fragile of the starting characters due to starting at a later location in the game, he has a bit of help that more than makes up for that. That his arm is possessed by 100 demons is not just a flavor detail, but we'll get to that. For starting weapons, he has a pistol and shotgun pair as well as his 100 demon arm. The gun is more useful at the start for dealing damage at ranged, while the void arm does more damage in general, but you have to get close up. It's also really good at racking up combos. We'll see the ups and downs of those as well as the other 3 weapons as we go along. But additionally, he also starts out with 2 spell souls, an angelic one because he was technically an angel before he was experimented on, and then his unique demon arm, from which he can summon all sorts of minions. Here we have the pair of Bob Marley the Brawler and Tiny Tim the aerial support. Those aren't actual names, in fact I don't think they have any, maybe they do, but that's just what I like to refer to them as. We also start off with the ability to wall jump from the start. No story progression needed to pick up that. Claudia over here, by the way, upgrades your starting gun, and if you plan on using it, which is suggested if you're focusing on the agility stat, you're gonna want to upgrade that post-haste. Vladyn's guns are super reliant on being upgraded to be at all worth a damn. And they are worth a damn once you upgrade them, but prior to that, not so much. That's why the Void Arm is the better main offensive weapon at the start. Its damage is more innate, so it's actually useful right away. But even using the Void Arm, it takes a while to kill any of these enemies because Vladyn just starts off incredibly fragile. Thankfully, his minions more than pick up the slack, including our newest addition, Knights. Bob Marley will try and rush forward and melee attack any enemies that he can come across. Tiny Tim will float near enemies and just damage them with a small AoE. Knights will generally stay at a distance and cast projectiles with either the fire, dark, or void element. But yeah, as you can tell if you're paying attention to the damage numbers here, they do way more damage than Vladyn does here at the start. Thankfully, that won't remain the case forever here. In fact, the fact that they haven't rebalanced the enemies to be easier for Vladyn here does actually help out somewhat, because it means you end up getting an inordinate amount of experience at the start, and so you very quickly gain the levels you need to actually be fairly tough. The first skill you want to grab no matter what build you're doing is that free skill cancel. They have that there right at the start for a reason. I'm not saying you can't get through the gardens without that skill cancel, but you're just gonna have a much more difficult time for really no reason. Going for the other stuff doesn't help too much at this point anyway, because Vladyn here, despite being the character you're actually controlling, is gonna be acting more as support than a main offensive striker. Most of your damage is going to be coming from your minions, so the way you want to play early on is basically to harry the enemies and stun them, allowing your minions to get in free shots. That's why I'm using his pistol and shotgun pair here rather than the Void Arm, even though its damage is much lower. It's a lot faster to fire, you can fire at range, so you're not likely to get hit by the enemy's strike, and Vladyn is quite squishy early on. And it's also very effective at breaking guard, more so than the Void Arm in my opinion. Especially if you spam the air heavy attack, which doesn't have the cooldown animation that the standing heavy attack does. But yeah, level ups come very quickly for Vladyn, thanks to that boosted experience. And once you've picked up that free skill cancel, you can put points in wherever. Going the middle tree for a bit more tankiness isn't the worst idea. It takes a while for the minions to drop off in power, so focusing on making Vladyn beefier, it's not a bad idea. If you want to actually make Vladyn a main offensive striker as early as possible, then you're going to want to focus on either the left tree or the right tree. The left tree if you plan on focusing on his guns and doing an agility focus build, and the right tree if you plan on focusing on his Void Arm, his magic capabilities, and intelligence or luck as his primary stat. That is the one that we're going with if you haven't been paying attention. I must say, after having gone through with Reyna not boosting luck at all and relying purely on boss and armor bonuses, it's nice to be raising luck from the start again. I just really like luck builds in this in general because they're not only quite powerful, in fact some of the strongest builds you can have are luck focused, but they also make it so that you get way more drops way earlier. The game doesn't have all that much in the way of farming, especially if you don't care about making a super broken build with a good gear synergy. But having a luck focused build basically cuts any farming you would have had to have done down to nil, and that's just really convenient. So yeah, here in the gardens, despite the fact that we don't have a poison elixir, we could have farmed up the materials. In fact, we might have them already, but it's honestly not too necessary. Poison can be a pain, but considering that your minions are going to be taking the majority of hits, it's unlikely you'll die, and if you do come close to death, you can always just sacrifice him. That is Vladyn's down spell. So he has a fairly potent emergency heal for situations such as that. And since our MP is rather low, we're gonna have to fight these guys on our own. Let's see if we've gotten strong enough. Yeah, we're doing pretty decently. Granted, they are fairly weak enemies, but we're clearly able to take on something at least without our minions, whereas right at the start we wouldn't have had even a chance. And yeah, right there, that is why his Void Arm is so good at racking up combos. When you attack in the middle of the air, you just continue to spin like Sonic the Hedgehog. And he probably has better comboing ability than even Reyna, or at the very least, roughly equal. So if you like big numbers, especially big combo numbers, Vladyn's your man. Of course, perhaps I was taking poison a bit too lightly. we're quite damaged at this point. But we have knights here to pick up for the slack. I'm sure we'll be fine. And hey, we brought in Tiny Tim too, so yeah, we're gonna be just fine. Unless I fail to dodge a rather slow projectile. Whoops. Yeah, this is the one tricky thing about starting as Vladyn. I mentioned he was squishy, but the worst part of it, and what makes him truly squishy in the live sense, is that he does not start with a health potion. They don't give you any freebies. Now, if you remember, there is one of those health potions in this area. In fact, it's not too far ahead. But considering you have to fight the majority of the enemies in the toughest challenges before actually getting to there, it doesn't help as much as you think. Fortunately, even if you do want to go for S ranks for your overall ranking, you do have a bit of leeway as you have 5 retries before you're knocked down to an A adventure rank. So it's not too difficult. And as for other things that we don't start with, we also don't start with a mana keystone. We have to pick it up from the same place that Reyna did, which means we can't do any of those puzzles for a little bit. Which is yet another way that Vladyn's campaign differs from everyone else's. Everyone else has the exact same progression as Reyna did, but because he has a different starting point, Vladyn's campaign progresses differently. That's probably why I like him overall a bit more and selected him for this second playthrough here rather than Gilda, even though I like playing as Gilda more in terms of the combat and her overall movement capabilities. I mentioned before she has a triple jump. I was slightly inaccurate. She can actually get a quadruple jump if you pick up all of the jump upgrades. Yeah, it's kinda crazy. But yeah, after having played through an identical campaign as both Wyatt and Reyna a few times, having a breath of fresh air here with Vladyn's campaign when I played it for the first time was really welcoming. And of course, as I've gone over before, they do you even one better by making Vladyn play significantly difficult right from the start, thanks to the whole minions mechanic, and the fact that one of his starting weapons just so happens to be better at support at the start rather than providing direct damage. I don't know how much of that is just how things happen to work out and how much is intentional design, but assuming it's all intentional, good on you, Endless Fluff. I just wish they had done the same with Gilda, and maybe even changed Wyatt's and Reyna's campaign progression a little bit in one of the later patches, to differentiate them a bit more. So yeah, the entire reason to go down this upper path here first is for this life potion. Far more important than it was with Reyna because it's our first life potion, and having that extra bit of security when going through the stages is really welcome in my opinion. I am still aiming for an overall S rank. Maybe this time I'll be able to pick up every treasure chest. But more than likely I'll end up missing one or two, probably a different one or two than the ones I missed as Reyna. Oh, I really wish that there was some sort of upgrade at some point that told you where on the minimap the treasure chests were. That would help so much. Just cutting out a little bit since we don't need to see that section of the stage again. Let's head on to the boss, and pick up another level up on the way. A very well-timed level up considering we're so close to the boss. We'll need all the strength we can for him because while the minions can take down the regular enemies on their own, we're gonna need to put in some work if we want to take down Shugoth before this century is over. Going with increased mana here as opposed to increased minion HP because they're not exactly squishy yet, and being able to summon them more frequently will definitely come in handy. We've run quite low on MP in a few instances here, and I'd like to shore that aspect up. But yeah, this encounter here, which if I recall we had a fair amount of trouble with as Reyna, is just made so easy by these minions. If you provide the proper support and they do their jobs, their AI isn't always the best, but it's simple enough that it doesn't usually screw up, then you can basically just end up stun locking entire groups of enemies and it's really satisfying. It also ends up happening here as well, despite it being another fairly tricky encounter. Me and Knights take down one sorceress, while Tiny Tim and Bob Marley take down the next. Good teamwork, friends. And with that, we're about ready to fight Shuggoth. First though, we're gonna switch over to our Void Arm. As I mentioned, we're going to have to actively contribute to dealing damage to the boss. We can't just stay at range and harry him with our weak-ass guns. So that means switching to the Void Arm. It also helps when he ends up shielding up at the top here. Magic damage does more to him. I like Vladyn's reaction here. It's just like, oh god, what is this gross thing here? Just not the kind of reaction you'd expect from a rather dour, brooding vampire man here. Actually, in general, his characterization is surprisingly pleasant, given his tragic backstory. Anyway, Shuggoth here is perhaps even easier than he was when we were Raynor, because with your minions taking positions all over the field, they can end up intercepting him before he even has a chance to attack. If you're then quick enough on the draw to intercept him as well, you can end up stun-locking him for a surprisingly long time, especially if you make use of Vladyn's aerial attacks with the Void Arm, and just end up doing a whole bunch of damage. Of course, if you're a bit slow to attack, he'll end up getting away, but it's not too big of a deal. We can carve through his armor quickly enough. The bigger pain is those skulls, but again, our minions do a good job at taking them down. And yeah, this fight really isn't any more exciting than it was last time. In fact, less so because of the easier time that we're having. You know, maybe I've been a bit too harsh on this minions craze that's been sweeping the nation. I can't really take the joke any further than that because I honestly don't know anything about the minions other than that they're from some DreamWorks or Pixar movie. I think they started off as like a minor element of one and then they just ended up getting super popular. So they ended up being franchised on their own, kind of like the Rabbids from the Rayman series of games. All I really know is that the common person really likes them and the common internet dweller really hates them. Well, that's enough talking about stuff that doesn't matter. Let's go back to talking about video games, stuff that does matter. Shuggoth is dead, and we had a very timely level up. Now we can start picking up some of the better skills from our skill trees here. Now, you could start investing in either the right or the left tree a little bit more, but I strongly recommend picking up Evade first. Yep, it's an air dash. In fact, Vladyn is the only character to have this technique. He is him blocking on the ground, and he is him blocking in the air. As I'm sure you can imagine, that air dash is wonderful for navigating the various areas. And once you pick up the double jump as well, he just has more aerial maneuverability than basically anyone except for Gilda. Now, heading back to Huck, we end up getting a level up on the way, so let's just apply that. Now we can start focusing on the 100 Demon Arm tree a bit more. We might pick up some other stuff from Sentry, but it's not going to be a main focus. For now, we're going to try and make Vladyn stronger so he doesn't have to rely on his minions as much. But before we quite head back to Huck, let's go pick up an item that we can now access. The one treasure chest in the room over to the right we couldn't get to before because unlike Raynor, we have neither the Ice Pillar nor any air boosting magic spells we can cast. But now that we have the air dash, that's not an issue at all. As we will eventually see once this damn Feral Siren goes down. I have way too much HP. But yeah, whereas before we had to do a bunch of cheesy platforming techniques, here all we require is a single button press. Just make sure that your skill cancel has recovered. One of the aspects I haven't discussed thus far is that the minions' attacks count as yours, as far as combos and skill cancels go. So they can keep up your combos, but they can also prevent you from recovering skill cancels. And that's something that's very important to keep in mind when playing as Vladyn. In fact, in some fights it might be better to not summon your minions even if they would be a help, simply so that you can more reliably recover your skill cancels. But that's something you have to decide on your own, on a case-by-case basis. So, back in Hook, let's save a godwoman's life. Oh no, Vladyn, don't you be a creeper. You were doing so well not having a bunch of dumb anime tropes about your characterization. At least the doctor responds appropriately. Don't talk to me or my daughter ever again. Well, not quite that harsh, but that's basically what he's saying. He's being polite about it. Well, plot progressed. Let's go check in on Claudia for a moment and see if she can't upgrade our gun. Even though we're not going to be relying on it primarily, I would like to show it off as the offensive powerhouse it is once you've actually upgraded it a little bit. Unfortunately, we're missing a single feral soul, as luck would have it. Even as a luck build, I don't have any of it. Oh yeah, I brought this up when we reached here as Reyna, but I love how Elder Brea's dialogue is customized for each character. She wants to get them to clear out the Library of Angels, and she'll say exactly what she needs to say to get them to do that. Hell, she even gets them to thank her for the job. What I'm saying is, Elder Brazier for 5th playable character. That will totally happen to this game that hasn't received an update in like 2 years. So, let's go kill us some angels, something Vladyn has no trouble with. Not in terms of willingness, and not in terms of capability of doing so. That right there is his focus finisher, summoning a giant-ass demon to just kind of wreck all of the enemy's faces. There's actually 2 different demons he can summon, and which one you get is purely random. That one there with the lasers did void damage, and the other does fire damage. So yes, you can run into a situation where you end up doing a fire focus finisher to fire-based enemies, or a void-based focus finisher to void-based enemies. But it's still pretty damn good focus finisher. It just does a lot of damage and hits everything on the screen. Alright, well, let's set up base in the library. And since we're playing as Vladyn, Reyna stays behind instead. And despite saying that Valdis is going to keep her company, nah, she'll be working with us. We'll be picking her up as our first assist right here. And she is very useful for Vladyn, not for the offensive properties, but for that passive mana regeneration whenever we summon her. I feel like there's a kind of missed opportunity here by not having Vladyn start with his own unique assist that's a demon. It would replace Valdis' slot, which would make sense, and she is supposed to be here with Reyna. Ah well. Well, that's gonna be it for this episode, is what I normally say, but let's continue on for a little bit more. Mostly because you didn't see this because I cut out the intervening portion, but we actually picked up another lesser feral spirit. So we're gonna end things off with having Claudia work on our guns. And in the meantime, recruit a few more crew members, as we did as Reyna. Deborsk will be super important for Vladyn here because I plan on playing him as a magic-focused character, and so upgrading those spell souls is going to be key to boosting his power. We didn't need to do so as Reyna all that much because she mostly relied on her fists. But if you're playing as a magic-focused character, you really need to upgrade those post-haste if you want to keep your spells competitive. And that will actually play into a way that we go through the game differently than we did as Reyna, but more on that later when it's relevant. Oh, and I do love Gilda's responses to Vladyn's flirting here. You know that dragons eat their mates, right? You sure you want to tangle with this girl? It's making me question my decision to play through as Vladyn over Gilda, because playing as her, we'd be getting so much more of that wonderful dialogue. Well, she's heading back to the library, so let's head back to Hook and see yet another woman. There's a lot of ladies in Vladyn's life. But he won't be building a harem anytime soon, not like Rainer. He just doesn't have her charm. But yeah, let's get that pistol and shotgun pair upgraded. Next time we'll get to see just how strong they are. I hope I'm not overselling them here because they are insanely powerful if you have an agility focused build, but I'm not sure how good if you're not going down that tree and not raising that stat. I guess we'll both find out next time. So yeah, that's it for today. Next time we'll take the tram to Ishk and see where life takes us. We'll actually have a few options of where to go.